Hi there, hi, it's Lindsay and I am back with a video about stamping. Okay, so I thought I would do my first kind of crafty video other than the catalogue introduction I did about just some stamping basics. Okay, and I thought I would get started just some really basic stuff. So if you're already a crafter, you already do stamping, then you're probably going to know most of this, but it's just really an introduction. So anyone that doesn't really know much about stamping, if you've just started out or you've been doing crafts or you haven't used stamping, maybe this would just give you a brief introduction. So to start off with, I just thought I'd show you obviously what is a stamp. Okay, so traditionally the stamps a lot of the time used to be the kind of ones on the wooden blocks. You get a wooden block with a red rubber stamp, and it'd be on a wooden block and you would stamp it down, and that's how they used to be. And things have moved a little bit forward because the blocks were bulky and quite heavy to post and also bulky to store. And so now they make they still have the red rubber stamps, but they have them as, so this is a new set here, they have them as cling stamps, and then you can take this backing off here, and it's not sticky. Okay, this is just it's a surface, it's like a shiny surface, and it will stick to what they call an acrylic block. So if I just get a block out, I'm just using an old block I've got here. But an acrylic block is just what it is, like a block of acrylic. It's not it's obviously, you can't break it really or anything like that. It can't really get scratched, and you can use them for different things in crafting, as even things like mixing ink onto, using it as a bit like a palette or something. But in terms of stamping, it's for putting the stamp on. Okay, so that's how you put the stamp on. It's that easy. You've got your stamp, you press your cling block or your clear acrylic block, your stamping block, and the stamp is stuck to it. Okay, so this is an old Stampin' Up block I have. They're normal stamping blocks that you buy in the catalogue are really nice and tactile and rounded and really nice feeling in your hand. I've kind of got grip space. This one is from a kit, so it's a bit different. It's just a plain clear square one, but it's still an old Stampin' Up one. And the stamp's now mounted, ready to stamp. And obviously the good thing about a stamp is you can ink it up with different colours, you can stamp it, and you can use it again as many times as you want. And I'll talk a little bit quickly about some techniques that you can do with different stamps in a minute. So that's the red ones, and the photopolymer are the other kind of stamp. They also go onto clear blocks. Now, if you ever couldn't find yourself a clear block, or you can't put your hands on one, or you're out somewhere about and you've forgotten your blocks or whatever, you can use anything really that's kind of a similar sort of surface. I've used a CD case before, where I've picked up something that I can anything that I can get, a shiny book or something that I needed to stick a stamp on just to be able to make an impression. So you can do that. But I'm just going to pick out this word. This word says Christmas, and you can either lay it on your block down, or you can place it down flat like the other one, and just there, and it just sticks to it. Okay, so the photopolymer ones are the same. They stick to the acrylic blocks, and that way all the stamp sets can be in these nice little neat cases. You can keep them like that. They have those titles on. You can store them on your shelves, but they don't take up very much space. The wooden block ones, obviously they took up quite a lot more space. And with these red rubber ones, you do also get labels. I should have pointed that out, sorry, that you do get these labels here that go on them, and actually make them a little bit more sticky. I'm just going to do this one here for you here. Sorry, there's a better way of doing this, but I'm just going to show you quickly the label. So they come with a label, and you stick the label on, and it's a little bit more tacky than what's on the surface of the stamps. Sorry, on the back of it without that label, and it just obviously now it shows you what stamp it is. So you don't have to use that cling thing; it will stick without it. But if you do use it, it becomes a little bit more tacky, and obviously you can see what the design is on the stamp. Okay, and I think I said this in the last video, but the benefit, I suppose, the difference is the red rubber. A lot of people like the red rubber traditional kind of stamps. They make a really good outline. It's like a matte feeling. It's not shiny or anything like that. The photopolymer ones have a bit of a shinier surface on the underneath here, and sometimes when you get a new stamp, that sometimes doesn't seem to ink up very well. I don't know if I can give an example of that, but you can use a pencil rubber and rub over the top of them, because they have a kind of a coating on in the process that is made, how you make these kind of stamps. It goes through a process and it leaves a kind of almost like a bit of an oil or something on it. So you can just wipe it like I'm doing my finger, or you can get a rubber and just rub the surface gently, and that'll take that glossy bit off a little bit and allow the ink to kind of adhere better. So in terms of stamping with them, you would take your ink pad, and with smaller stamps I always take the stamp onto the ink pad. Okay, so I just tap lightly. You don't want to tap really hard because you'll end up with ink on the block, and then you'll make when you to go to stamp it, you could risk putting that ink then onto your card. And then so you just place it down, and I like to place it down quite softly and then just give it a bit of a firm push and lift back up again. And that's made, I mean, to be fair, I couldn't really show the example about the glossiness on this stamp because it's made a great impression first time. Sometimes if you've got maybe a stamp with some bigger areas of inking, like that, maybe something like here, it maybe would be a little tiny bit patchy on the first couple of stamps. So I'd just take a rubber and rub over that, and that'll help that give a really good full inked area there. But yeah, that's stamped brilliantly first time. And you might hear the technique stamping on and stamping off, and that basically is, I'm using this ink here. It's the Evening Evergreen. It's one of the ink colours from last year. But if you stamp one time with your stamp and then lift it off, and then stamp a second time with your stamp and lift it off, you might notice there you've got the same colour but in a bit like a lighter shade. So stamping on, stamping off just means stamping it on first off on a piece of scrap or something, and then coming to your project and stamping it. And it's really good for things like landscape with trees and shadows and things like that, where you can create different maybe like tree silhouettes or something in different greens or something like that, or a sky kind of a background, things like that as well. So yeah, so then the best idea is, obviously once you start stamping, is just to go like steady with your stamps. I'm going to do the same again, tap. And with this stamp, there's much more surface area to get. You can see quite clearly where the ink's on there, but just give it a good, and there's lots and lots of little taps like that. You can get really big background stamps. So you can get stamps that are nearly the full size of these cases here. And you can't then really kind of turn them over and tapping around like that. That's not as easy. In that case, I would take the pad to the stamp, and I would ink up by tapping the pad on the stamp like that all over until you can see it's all covered, and do that. So again, take it, and I just go straight down, okay, and then straight up. You don't want to rock it. You don't. I'm going to try and do so if I put it down there and just slightly rock it, I don't know if you can see that there, but it's fuzzed. It's fuzzed on the side there. So you've got extra ink that's moved. I didn't even really move it. I literally just tipped the stamp a little bit and it fuzzed. So when you're stamping, just go straight down and straight back up there. And that's how easy I had ink then on my finger when I picked that up, and I've got that on the project. So it's quite easy. If you went down like this and you end up there with a bit of ink on the side of your block, and then you stamp down, and some people press it, and there you've got an edge line there because you pressed too heavy into the stamp pad, and because the ink's gone around the edge of the stamp there. So yeah, so just straight down, straight back up, quite gentle. Obviously you need a bit of pressure to make sure the ink goes on. And then you can also use other things. You don't have to use an ink pad like this for doing your stamps. You could use markers. Now I haven't got any of the Stampin' Up markers at the moment because obviously you can't buy them till next month. But these are their Stampin' Blends. These are the alcohol-based or solvent-based markers, okay? These you do not colour. They dry very, very quickly. You don't colour stamps with these onto the rubber. These would be more likely to be used for colouring in. So these kind of markers you can colour in your stamps. Obviously I'm not really going to colour a green mouse with a pink marker, but you would colour in your area there like that with these kind of markers. But the other kind of markers, the water-based ones, which is the slim brush with a brush tip and a end on them, you can use that to colour. And if you use the brush tip end, you can use that to colour on your stamp. And the benefit of that is you can have a whole range of markers. You could buy the full box set and have every colour that Stampin' Up does. Whereas the ink pads are obviously a bit more expensive to buy individually. So you might have fewer colours. So you'd have more colour range by using the markers. But also you could colour certain areas. So I'll do a proper example of this on another video when I do a project with something like this in it, but you could use markers and colour, say, like different areas of the stamp. So you might want to colour different greens, like dark green into lighter green. You might want to colour something like this black on the top and bottom, but do a bit of a red around the ribbon or something like that. Or even words, you can colour different, you know, letters in different colours, whatever, something like that. So markers are a really good alternative, but so you can do more than one colour. But also, if you wanted a stamp, say you've got a stamp that had a greeting on it, and say that was the full greeting, you could then just use your markers to just colour the bit you want and then stamp. So you can kind of do selective stamping from a stamp. You could even colour, you know, if you had, I don't know, like a stamp of a horse or something, and you just wanted the head because you want it to be appearing above a barn, you could just do part of the stamp, something like that. So the markers give you a bit more versatility on the stamps over the ink pads, but obviously you do have to be quite careful colouring them and making sure you've got it all covered. It's a lot easier just to tap on an ink pad and get that coverage really quickly. So cleaning stamps, once you've inked, obviously now I won't be able to use that again in another ink pad, for example, because it's got the ink on there. And originally I did use baby wipes when I first started stamping years ago. I had packs of baby wipes and I used to just do that and clean them. And then you would have to dry them afterwards to give them a bit of dry off the excess sort of moisture from the wipe. And obviously you go through your wipes. So Stampin' Up had a really great idea. This is years old, and this one is years old. Okay, I kept this. I didn't get rid of this one when I stopped crafting in my when I first came over here for a while, when I had my young kids, and I kept it because I really love it. It's a great piece of equipment, the Stampin' Scrub, and it gives you, it's just, you probably can't see, and there's a tiny few raindrop pictures there and a sunshine there, basically for wet and dry. So you keep one side wet and you keep one side dry, and you have some stamping mist, which is cleaner liquid, and you simply spray your stamping mist on one side, and that helps really clean and kind of condition your stamps and make sure all the ink is properly off, rather than it just being just water. But you could use both. And then you just go around like that, give it a really good scrub, and you can see all the ink is taken off that stamp. And then you go on the dry side, scrub, and it's dry, and that's it. Now obviously I haven't pushed it in far enough to clean that block, so I would need to clean that block off, and I'd probably just do that with a bit of tissue or wipe or something. But that is the stamp, and now you can see if I stamp down like that with it, there's nothing coming off. There's no watermark, there's no edge, there's no green at all, so it's really nice and clean. And then that would just go back into your box, or however you want to store them within your stamp box. Okay, so cleaning them is really easy with this, but yeah, you can use wipey wipe. Some people even would take them to the sink and run them off. But when you're crafting and you're busy crafting using different stamps, especially if you're using the same stamp multiple times with different colours, like maybe flowers or something like that, that's a great, quick and easy way to clean them and dry them all at the same time. And the smell of this is really nice as well. And then I just want to say a couple of things. So there's different kinds of stamps. You can get stamps that have like a gradient. I'll see if I've got something there. The big background stamps there that I was talking about, the great big ones. So they would be about this size in real life. So that's where you take the ink pad to the stamp, that way around. Some of these ones here, you'll see, maybe that's a good example there. Forever Fern, okay? Really popular set as well. It's really versatile. It can be used for lots of different things. The leaves there have like almost like a gradient on them, and that's only in recent years those stamps have been sort of more developed. Rather than just the line and outline, they've developed a way of kind of almost etching on the stamp, so that when you stamp it comes up with a gradient like it is in that picture there. So there's different ones like that. So some is just purely an outline that you can colour in, or that you can do whatever, you know, with the designs in there, and some are etched to give like a gradient there. And you might be able to see on the picture up there, I don't know if you can see that clearly, but that stamp set there has been used there. And obviously then you can also get a brush. I think I showed you this the other day, things like the water brushes. This is a very old Stampin' Up set. They've changed since then, they don't look the same anymore. But these water brushes, you can then just have a tiny bit of water on and blend through the colour on those images, or you can use your markers, or you can use, if you take your ink pads, this is another great thing about these ink pads, is that if you give them a bit of a squish, and you squish down in the lid, the ink transfers into the lid, and you can then use your brush, okay, and with a bit of water, the water's inside this brush, or just a paintbrush and some water, and you can take that ink from there to colour in then your image as well. But again, I'll do things like that later on another video. And then just really quickly, I've done Stamp On, Stamp Off, which is this one here, and the texture stamps. You get something called a Stamparatus, or they're called different things for different brands, but they're basically a tool, like a kind of a box like this where you put the stamp on, and you actually put the stamp onto a clear lid that flips down, and then you ink up the stamp and flip it. And because of that, you can do loads and loads of cards really quickly, but also you can stamp. And if you stamped an image where maybe you didn't get a great impression, like down here where you're missing a bit, you can re-stamp it again, because you just have to re-ink it and close the lid back again, and it will be exactly, you won't get any of that kind of fuzzing or blurring. You get exactly the crisp impression back on top of the crisp impression. So that's a really good tool with stamping. You could also do what they're called masking. So masking would be something like if you wanted to do that little mouse character and you wanted to put another one behind it. So masking would be where you can go ahead and stamp your image, and once you've stamped your image, you have you stamp an image, you cut it out, and you would have a stamped image on a piece of paper. You put it over your image and you would stamp again next to it. When you take that paper off, you've got another partial stamp here. So there can be lots of techniques to do, and I'll do those properly another time, but it's just to show you that there's loads of versatility with stamping, that you can really switch up and make different things. It's not just the pictures on the box, you know, there's so many things you can do. You can also mirror image, so you can stamp onto a piece of acetate or something, and then you can turn the acetate and flip it and re-stamp back down. And I think you can do that with the Stamparatus as well. That's something I haven't done for a long time, but it's an old technique really with the acetate. So you stamp it down on a shiny clear piece of acetate and turn that back over and stamp it, and it reverses the image. So if you wanted to have two mice facing each other, or if you want a stamp but you don't want the mouse, you know, looking that way, you want them to be facing the other way, you can use that kind of technique for that. And then lastly, things that make a difference about the stamping, or what you're going to choose cardstock wise will make a difference. So whatever cardstock or paper you're stamping onto makes a difference. If the cardstock's kind of too rough and hasn't got sort of like a slightly coated surface, the ink may absorb very quickly into it and sometimes can fuzz a little bit. You really need a good quality cardstock to do stamping onto. The Stampin' Up cardstock with the colour range is also really nice and makes it great. So if you want to stamp like this polished pink onto polished cardstock, that's also really great effect, especially for backgrounds. You might be colouring in your images. Something like this would typically be coloured in with markers or something, or a brush and ink, and you would want to stamp in a certain type of ink to make that part possible. I'll do all of that on an ink video, but you want to choose the right ink for depending on what you're doing. So this is water-based ink, all of these pads that Stampin' Up do, and these markers are solvent markers, so they work great together. You can see there that I coloured in with the solvent marker, and the little dots on the scarf didn't blur or buzz at all. If I'd have used a water-based marker on water-based ink, those outlines would start blending and bleeding with the water marker ink. So that's, I'll cover that in an ink video specifically, ink and markers kind of colouring in video. But yeah, so that's one of them. And also if you were heat embossing or something like that, you might not want to be using this kind of ink. You might be using a different kind of ink for stamping with, it's almost like a sticky ink, clear ink. And then you can stamp, and then you can put your bit of embossing powder and heat up. And again, I'll do another one on that one. And there's so many different techniques you can use, but just a really basic to stamping anyway. That is the kind of different kinds of stamps, the things you can do with them, how to just really basically stamp with them, what kind of equipment you would use. So you'd need your stamp, you need some form of ink or colour, and you need something to hold the stamp like the blocks. And obviously you can create so many different projects, and I will try and do a little project and later and show you maybe something, an image of something that I've done with those. So anyway, that was it for today. I was just a quick one, and I hope it's been a little bit interesting, especially if you're not used to crafting. So great, thanks very much, bye bye.